Hello and welcome to our SVS character design video with Shane Lewis. This is Will Terry, and I've got Jake Parker here with me today. And Shane is going to be teaching us about the psychology of your characters. I'm not sure exactly what you're going to call your lesson, Shane, but
I don't really know either. We're mostly just talking about designing characters, not just visually, but designing personality and where to start before you draw to make
right.
sure that your character actually has a direction before you go too far scribbling stuff down that you don't really have a name for.
That's awesome. So
That's
before
cool.
we get into that, we thought we'd hear a little bit about Shane and maybe like where
Yeah,
he's
yeah. I
from.
just I was just asking what your background was. I was wanting to know where you went to school and I guess how you got to where you're at now.
Well, I went to BYU and I started out in the illustration department. I don't think I ever really wanted to be an illustrator. I just wanted to get into animation, and that was the closest thing they had at the time to animation. And so I fought my way into the program, which is a long story. If you want to hear it, I can tell it. But um, what should have been the first day of my last semester in the illustration program, I showed up for my first class that day, and there was a sign on the door of the building that said animation class is now offered. And so I went into the counselor's office and I said, I want to drop my major. I want to switch majors right now. And they said, you're crazy. You're so close to graduating. Just finish this one semester and you'll graduate, and then you can get into some other, like maybe take additional classes and try to get into animation that way. And I said, no, I don't want to be an illustrator. I only want to animate. So I kind of jumped ship right there against the direction of the faculty advisor and started in animation. And a lot of my credits and stuff transferred over, so I was able to graduate from animation just over a year later.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. Okay,
That's
I
cool. And
do.
so
Go ahead.
I was just going to say now you're at Avalanche, which is or is it Disney Interactive? What's the actual
Yeah,
official title?
it's Avalanche Studios, and it's part of Disney Interactive. It's
Yeah,
Disney
okay.
Interactive has, well, they used to have several studios making games for them. It's kind of, the numbers have dropped on how many studios they have recently, but we
Yeah.
are still with Disney Interactive.
Oh,
Okay,
cool.
cool. And you
We
most
just finished
recently
up Disney Infinity.
okay, which looks amazing.
Yeah, it's
Looks
fun. I
really
really
cool.
like it. It's I have a really fun time playing it with my daughters. They're 5 and 3, and mostly they just want to run around and find a different horse and see where it'll take them. They're not really into like solving puzzles and like completing missions. They just want to screw around. So it's a good game for that.
Okay, so I do want to hear a little bit more backstory on, because you had talked to me at lunch the other day about struggling in school, and I struggle, and a lot of people that follow my blog or that I've come in contact with know, because I've talked about my struggles. But I always love to hear that, and I think it gives people hope. So I want to hear how you struggled in school a little bit.
Okay, I'll start by going way, way back to when I was a kid. Most of my friends had athletes and posters and things, like their walls were decorated with sports, and my walls were decorated with posters of animals.
Mm.
I have always been way into seeing animals as characters and like assuming that they all sit around and chat when no one's around. So I had like mountain lions and bears, mostly forest animals. Those were my favorites. But I tried to draw them, never receiving any direction on how to draw. In all through high school, just to get into college, I put so much time into taking the classes I knew that they wanted me to take that I didn't take any art classes. I I didn't make time for it. And so I got to BYU and went in because like I said, I knew I wanted to get into animation, and illustration was the closest thing to it. So I applied to the illustration program, and they looked at my stuff and they said, basically, you're terrible. Go away and find something else. And so I went in to talk to the guy that had signed the rejection letter. And I said, hey, I really want to do this, and I know you don't think I'm good enough, but I think I can get good enough. I just need an opportunity. I need classes. I need someone to teach me how to draw, because all I've ever done is just draw for fun, and so they had no form, no structure, there was nothing that I was doing that was really right. So when they turned me down, they weren't wrong. My stuff wasn't good, and I knew that, but I also
Mhm.
knew that I could get good if somebody would show me how to do it. And so I went in and I said, could you just give me a shot? And he said, well, I said, what can I draw to get better? And he said, everything. And I said, well, what can I get better at? And he said, all the stuff. You're terrible at everything. And so I said, okay, well, can I reapply? And he said, you can reapply the beginning of fall with everybody else. So I went home that summer and I got a job waiting tables. And when I was at home, I was drawing, just constantly drawing. And I couldn't tell if it was getting better. I thought it was, but I brought stuff back in and he said, still terrible. Maybe you should get into accounting. He actually like recommended accounting to me, like specifically. I don't know why, if I looked like an accountant or what, but he's like, you should get into accounting. And I said, well, I'm not going to get into accounting. So I kept pestering him and he said, well, there's 3 of us who would have to agree to let you into the program, and I'm saying no. So I guess if the other 2 said yes, then you'd be in. So I went and talked to the other 2 and bugged them a bunch for a while. And the day that the classes started, I went and talked to one of the other 2, and he said, how about you just go in and sit in on that class, because if we let you in, then it'll be good for you to have already been in that class today. So I went in there, and he came and got me out of class, and I thought, oh, great, they're cutting me. They're telling me to go away. And he came and he said, we're going to make room for you, but it's kind of on a probational period. Like if you don't get better quickly, then you can't stay. And so I went crazy. All I wanted to do was make sure I wasn't the worst one in the class. I could look around and tell I wasn't the best, but I was like, I will not be the worst in here. And so while everybody was working on their projects in the studio and stuff, I would just walk around and see what everybody was working on. And if I felt mine was at least middle of the road or higher, then I was pretty confident. If I didn't, then I would go and just scrap it all and start over, because I was like, I've got to make sure that I can stay in here.
Wow.
So yeah, I kind of fought my way in. I didn't let them tell me no. Like I said, I think they were right. I wasn't very good, and they didn't know what to base my work ethic on. They didn't know if I was going to keep working or if I was just going to get in and try to coast. So I don't fault them for telling me I was no good, because I wasn't. They just didn't know how hard I was going to work to get better.
So that brings up another good point. Do you think that anybody can pretty much work their way into it if they're really super committed?
Yeah, I think so. I was actually thinking about this while I was putting my notes together, and I think anybody could be a great guitar player. I think most anybody could be a really good dancer. I mean, some people just don't have rhythm. There's just no way to do it. They can't learn it. But I really think that for anybody, if they put the time and effort in, I think they could probably. I just went black there. Lost my screen. I think that anybody can get good at something if they put in the time. Some people, it may be a lot more time than others, but I really think that if you're dedicated, you can do it.
Yeah. I would agree with that. I mean, you got some guys who, they'll never be able to dunk, but they'll still be a good basketball player, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's the same in art. Like, there's some people that just will never be able to do some artistic feat, right? But they'll still be a good artist.
Yeah.
And,
yeah, I agree, because I've put a lot of time into trying to paint. Like when I was in the illustration program, I would try to paint, and I was like, man, I just can't do this. But a big part of it was I didn't have the interest in doing it.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you've got the interest, and that will drive you to keep working at it. And so you got to find what you love, and then I think you can get good at it just out of sheer interest in it.
Yeah, that's cool.
So where do we go from here? You want me to dive in?
Yeah. So sorry, I accidentally turned my mic off for a second, and I thought you guys just went silent.
No.
We just both shunned you at the same time.
Like,
okay.
Shane had everything. He said everything there needed to be said about that.
And I hope everybody can tell how much we love doing this, because it really is a treat for Jake and I to meet with another artist and just kind of talk about these sorts of things. So we're as excited as I hope people listening to this later on are, because I want to know what you've got for us tonight. So with that.
All right. Well, I will dive in with what I've got. I don't want this to be too me talking to you guys and telling you stuff. So if you have questions or if you have anything to contribute, then speak up.
Okay.
Because I do have the potential to just keep yapping for a really long time. So interrupt when you want to.
Okay, cool.
All right. What I have here to start with, I just wanted to make sure that it's clear in the beginning. Like I said, I just want to talk about personality, designing personality, not just designing the appearance of characters, but figuring out who they are and making sure your design matches. the visual design matches. So there's a lot more to character design than just how a character looks. If the character doesn't seem real, from the way it looks to the way it acts, anything in between, it won't connect with audiences. Audiences will see it and it'll feel foreign to them and it'll feel detached. The only thing that really, like whether it's a written character in a book or a character on screen in a film, the thing that makes a character feel right is that relatability. It's the looking at it and seeing it and believing that it's alive. Mm-hmm. So what I wrote down here that I think this kind of sums it up. The best way to do that is to believe that the character is real. Don't speak or act for your character. Learn who they are and see what they do. So you kind of let your design of the character visually be determined by the character. Like, mm-hmm. Don't dress them up yourself. Decide, hey, what are you going to wear? What would you dress in?
And I think that's a great point. If I can stop you for just a second, because I think, and one of the things that I actually came to a realization myself, probably only 10 years ago, was that that illustrators, by and large, we want to beautify, we want to embellish, we want to make pretty pictures. But what I hear you saying is, well, before you start just drawing something because it makes you happy, you want to make sure you're drawing the appropriate things for that specific character, for that specific situation, for that specific emotion.
Yeah, and there's times when just doodling, just like sketching, seeing what comes out, like that can actually inspire you. You can come up with a cool character from a sketch, mm-hmm. but you can also come up with a cool sketch from a character, where you can think, okay, this is what I want this to be. What lines can I put where to make the character that I've got in my head appear like on a screen or on a page for somebody else. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of a switching around way of looking at it. It's just let the personality determine the character, and there's still value in letting the character determine the personality, and like doing a drawing first and being like, oh, I see who this guy is. Mm-hmm. But I just want to talk a little about going about it from the opposite way, the way I was explaining.
Okay.
So before you draw, the best thing you can do is learn everything that you can learn about the character. If somebody's asked you to do a book cover, it's obvious that the first thing you'd want to do is read the book, or at least have the author explain it really, really well and like give you a backstory and know everything you can possibly know. Because doing a book cover about a story or a character that you know very little about, the odds of you getting it right, it's a needle in a haystack. You may get it right, but it only will be from luck, not from doing it from a knowledge base. Like, okay, I get who this is, and I can actually approach designing him visually now. Mm-hmm. And if it's not from a book, if it's something of your own creation, then you kind of have to write your own book. Not literally. I mean, it doesn't require an entire book, but it's good to consider a few things. So,
that's interesting, because a lot of times I do the aesthetics first. So it's like the form defines the function of this character. But I think your method is good, because if you're going into it with you know you need a bad guy, and you already know that this bad guy has X, Y, and Z traits, that's definitely going to influence the design. But a lot of times I'll have in my mind what this bad guy, what I want him to look like. He's going to be, lizard-like, and he's going to have, this color scheme to him. And I won't be thinking about, personality traits so much.
Yeah, and like I said, there's value in going at it from that way too, where it's like, hey, now that I see, like a lizard, this did work out really cool. I like it. Mm-hmm. And now you can see him, and you're like, now that I see who he is, I can kind of start to piece his personality together. But especially when you're working with more of an ensemble cast, where you're like, okay, I know how these guys have to relate to each other. Uh-huh. It's best to really know them well before you get too far into it. So I don't know PowerPoint very well, so I didn't want to waste my time on that, so I just made JPEGs.
That's what I do too.
That's good.
I'll actually just do Photoshop layers and just turn the layers on and off.
See, I guess I could have done that too.
Whatever works.
Okay. Well, I made these JPEGs, so this is like this really not elegant way to present this, but
no, it's good.
But here it is.
It's good.
So To define a character, I put this list together. This isn't a complete list. This is just a few things that came to mind. This is like the very beginning of a list of what you need to consider, or at least what I think is worth considering when you start designing a character. So the first thing, what makes your character unique? There are a billion of each kind of character, pretty much. Like, if you're going to do a story about a mouse, a lot of mice have already been approached. So what is different about yours? So I have this thing. I'll have a lot of drawings that I'll just show. These are just, I looked through my archives of images and I just found things that I thought kind of I could help use to explain some of these ideas. Mm-hmm. So this one, what makes your character unique? I drew this. I wanted to, I don't know if you guys have seen Jaws 3.
I missed it.
Jaws 3 is a 3D movie, or at least it was originally presented that way, about a shark that's about the size of Florida, and he attacks everything from like the coast to like submarines or something.
Is
this a ridiculous concept?
Is it the one where he gets electrocuted at the end?
No, that's Jaws 2.
Oh, darn.
I know way too much about my Jaws movies, but
I do remember the trailer for Jaws 3. And seeing how big that shark was. It's like,
yeah, it's ridiculous. There's
like
the shark
Godzilla
eats a guy. The shark eats a guy, and the guy has a, I think he's holding a grenade, and so they reach in there with some kind of hook and like pull the pin from the grenade to blow up the shark, and it's really dumb. It's a terrible movie. But I was thinking about that, and I was like, I want to draw something where I just show like this ridiculously large shark, and so with this design, and this. I probably only did a couple of sketches before I arrived at this one, but I wanted to just make something that looked way too huge. So just size relationship-wise, you can see that the two divers are much, much smaller. But then, why does this thing keep popping up?
Because it's Windows.
Yeah, I'm around a really professional setup here. But then I've also got, you can see that his fin there on the side is really, really little. His teeth are giant. I just messed with proportions. And so the thing that is, like, as far as this character, what makes this character unique is just size relationships. The giant mouth opening that big, the little tiny fin to just kind of mess with some size things. Even if the divers weren't there, I was hoping that that would kind of give the indication that I was dealing with a very, very large shark. So the first thing then is what makes your character unique. Why are you, like, what's the difference in what you're designing now compared to everything else that's ever been done? If it's the same as everything else that's ever been done, then it's already been designed. You don't need to do it.
So you're saying with back to the mouse thing that you've got Mickey Mouse, you've got Tom and Jerry, or is it? Let's see, it's Tom. No, Jerry.
Yeah, Jerry.
And then and so we know what they look like, and so you're saying, how do you differentiate yourself from the thing? This really wants you to choose something.
There, keep it and don't show me again. Okay, sorry. Okay, so yeah, it's just.
I think also too, what makes your character unique, personality-wise, you know, background-wise too, right? You've got to be thinking of that as well.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot to consider. It's just what are you presenting that's new? You can use things. You can borrow little elements of things that you've seen. That's actually, I'm going to get into that in a little bit about like the value in doing that. But what are you presenting that's new? What in this character is something that people haven't seen that will differentiate it from everything else that they are unfamiliar with? I mean that they are familiar with. So the next thing I've got, why do they think the way they do? Looking at this one, you can consider the way that people you know can see the exact same thing happen, experience the exact same thing, and react to it very differently. And that's stuff that defines a person's character. So when something happens to the character that you're working with, how do they react? You can see in pretty much anything you think of, whether it's films, cartoons, anything like that, that this kind of stuff comes through in a character. If they're the kind who overreact and get really angry, their character designs that you see, if you see like a model sheet or something, will generally look fairly angry, and that's kind of who they become. So why do they think the way they think? I've got, this is kind of just like, again, not as much about what it looks like, because these were not designed by me. They were drawn not wonderfully by me, but here is an Ewok where I was just kind of showing like his personality is, why does he think the way he thinks? Why is he not trying to dodge these? Because he's familiar with stormtroopers and their ability to aim, and he's fine just standing still. No matter how close they get, they won't hit him.
Oh.
So,
That's a good image.
so you kind of have to look at it as this character, knowing what they know with the backstory they've got, with everything that they've ever dealt with their childhood, with the things they're afraid of, all these things. How do they react to a situation? So when you're defining a personality in a character, you have to consider those kinds of things.
Can I insert something really quick that goes along
Yes.
with this? So,
yep.
In one of my college classes, I had students do a project where they really knew the characters really well that they were working on. It was a known entity. I won't say what it was, but I don't want to give away the students. I don't want them to know who I'm talking about. But anyway, this one student did really, really well with a project that was a nursery rhyme that everybody knows that everybody's heard of for a long time. And did really, really, really well with that project. And then the next project, they were able to design their own characters and come up with their own idea. And it was amazing how the characters in the second project looked anonymous, and they were boring, and they had no emotion, and I didn't connect with them at all. I wish I could show you exactly what I'm talking about and flash them on the screen, but I don't have permission to do that. I'm not prepared to do that right now. But anyway, they and we talked about that, and that was one of the things that came up in the critique is you didn't sell me, you didn't get me to care about your characters at all in the second one, because they're just standing there emotionless like zombies, and you didn't know your character. You don't know the story. You didn't come up with enough to sell this as a and I think you have to grab people emotionally, right? I mean, you have to kind of to get them somehow and to connect with your characters, and that's one way that they didn't.
Yeah, if your character doesn't matter to you, it's not going to matter to other people. And so, that's kind of where a lot of this is going. It's just if you don't really understand who it is, then I don't know how you can make other people understand by looking at your character.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I hope I didn't cut you off there.
No,
Anything else on that?
Nope.
Okay. So the next thing I've got is how do they see themselves? So you can learn a lot about somebody by what they think of themselves. Somebody can just have everything going for them and just be so downtrodden and so disappointed in everything that they do, and it's like, I don't get why you're that way. So their character isn't what they can do, it's actually how they feel about their ability to do it. So much of who people are comes through in how you see yourself. So I've got this this gangster bear. I don't know, I was just looking at this today and I was like, shouldn't there be some line right here or something for that gun to be held up? I'm not too concerned with that. But this bear is very confident and doesn't feel threatened. He's very gangster, mobster-like, and that's what I was going for, at least. I hope that's coming through. But it's how does he see himself? I wanted him to just look like he did not care who else was in the room or who was around him or if anybody was behind him. He feels like he's the toughest around, and so that level of confidence makes him kind of who he is. And he's smoking. Don't smoke. If I was Disney, I would have to erase that because you can't promote smoking and guns. It's a terrible image. What am I showing that for?
No, with kids.
Well, one thing that I find interesting is, and I think I mentioned this the other day, but it's when our family has always been a big fan of The Office, and one of the things that I love is when you get into the characters. I mean, I know The Office is old now, but I'm talking about the first maybe 3 or 4 or 5 seasons. But if you take the character of Dwight, one of the funniest things for us was when Dwight hasn't entered the room yet, but there's a situation going on, and you as the viewer are going, "Ooh, I wonder how Dwight's going to react to this," or "I wonder how Michael's going to react to that." When they get there, and when they arrive, and when they see what's going on, the characters were so well defined that you knew how they were going to behave before they were even in the room, before they were even in the scene.
That's one of my favorite presentations in like a comedy is when people walk into a situation that is like really bizarre and they just stand there and look at it, and you know the character well enough that you're like through your head you're running through what is this guy thinking,
right?
and you actually get some time to just sit there and enjoy the moment. Like, I'm seeing this as this guy. This has got to be blowing his mind.
Right.
And I love when they do that in film or TV or in anything. It's funny because it lets the audience have a chance to get into that character and think, what are they thinking in this moment?
Right.
Let me move on to the next one here. How do they see themselves? How do others see them? And so this goes back to the first thing. Like, some of your character comes from how you're perceived by others, just because this is the visual appearance. Like for character designers, when you're actually just like designing how they're going to look, is how does somebody else think you are? So I got this platypus who is way out of place with the beaver side and with the duck side. He's a weird mix of the two, and feels very out of place. So this drawing actually kind of works for how do you see yourself and how do others see you.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just, I don't know if that one shows it really well. But
Oh
there's
yeah.
something.
So
It's something else to consider.
Would you suggest I know you taught character design at BYU, but which is part of the end of your story, right? You got asked to teach there after.
Yeah. Yeah, just the same guy who told me I should get into accounting actually asked me to teach classes for him, which that was a kind of a proud moment for me.
So when you taught your students there, would you have them, like, if you ask them to know these questions, do you have them write down answers? I mean, should we be writing this stuff out and making those kinds of descriptions?
You could write this stuff, or you can just kind of come up with your own questions too. I mean, I don't have on here like how old are they, what are their parents like, what was their upbringing. A lot of these things, it kind of depends on the character that you're aiming for, like which questions you want to ask yourself.
Mm-hmm.
These ones are just kind of general. But there are, like I said, if you're not basing your character on someone else's book or someone else's writings or something that someone else has done, and you're starting from scratch with your own thing, then you kind of have to decide what you're aiming for and what questions feel pertinent to ask.
Right. But I mean, I guess to know your character really well, in some situations you might want to actually write paragraphs about them, wouldn't you?
Yeah, for the class that I taught at BYU, the one of the first things we did, I would have them all take a couple of days to just think about what they wanted to do, which character. Like, choose something that means something to you, something you actually want to work on, because you're going to hate this class. Because the whole semester, all we would do was work on the one character, and at the end, we'd work on some backgrounds and some like sidekick kind of characters. But the bulk of the class was spent on figuring out facial expressions and like gestures and stuff, and like really spending a lot of time on the one character. So the first thing we did before they drew at all, I would have them write and just sit down and do like several pages of, give me a backstory. Let me know who this character is. If like, look at it as though it's like your dad. What do you know about your dad? Probably a lot of stuff. But choose somebody who you know and think, look at all these things I know about them. And if I were to try to draw them, I would try to infuse all of those things into my drawing. I wouldn't just go, well, my dad's got a mustache, so this guy's got a mustache, it's good enough.
Mm-hmm.
You try to see, like, well, there's a lot in his personality. There's a lot behind those eyes that I know about. I'm going to try to work that in some way, whether it's through wrinkles or through gray hair or through, I don't know, like scars. There's a lot of things that you can kind of point toward like when you're writing. And so, yeah, like that's one. I think there's a lot of value in that. If you're not basing your character on a character in a book, give yourself something to go from. Write something down. Just kind of come up with a brief history of your character, and see where you want it to go.
Cool.
So let's see. How do others see them? What do they always do? So there's characters who, like, they're just obsessed with one thing. Like, this character, all he's thinking about ever is food. So that's his thing. I mean, like the coyote. What does he always do? He always chases the roadrunner. That's him. So what did they need to show in that character? They needed to show that he was really hungry, so he was skinny, and they needed him to look frazzled and needed to look like he was kind of at wit's end. So like the hair was all kind of unkempt and stuff, and he had big buggy eyes. He had to look kind of insane, and he needed to look super hungry. So that's what he always did. So when you're designing a character, I've got this. This upset some people. You don't juggle chicks. But I wanted this rabbit to look like this was not something that he was uncomfortable with, like, oh, I hope these chicks don't get hurt. He needed to look like he either does this all the time or has been wanting to try this for a long time and is really enjoying it. I want him to feel very comfortable. So that's why he looks like he's having a really good time with it. I didn't want it to look like it was foreign. Yeah, this is why he lives. This is what he does all the time. I just want to juggle chicks. And on the other side, what would they never do? And for that, I have a drawing of nothing because I've never drawn a character doing something it would never do, because it totally undermines the whole idea of the thing. But think of what they would never do, because you can actually learn a lot about your character by, well, I know he would never hurt somebody, and so then obviously the rabbit juggling chicks is the wrong way to go.
Right.
But if you think of, okay, this character always does this character never does this, it'll help you kind of direct your drawings from the emotion that you show. While I was thinking about this, I was looking at some images online, and I came across some caricatures, and I saw one of Michael Jackson, and he had this really quirky, weird, like way too happy smile, and I thought, I have never, in any picture I've ever seen of Michael Jackson, seen him smiling like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is, to me, something that Michael Jackson would never do, and that caricature missed the mark as far as I was concerned. I could tell it was Michael Jackson. I mean, the facial features, everything was right, but the smile was out of place. And so that, to me, was something he would never do, and it felt wrong. So you kind of have to decide what do they always do, what do they never do. And then there's just a list that I made here. What are the characters' hobbies, interests, fears, strengths, weaknesses, flaws, and a bunch of other things that I could have listed. But that's just kind of the tip of the iceberg there. It's just figure out what your character does, what they spend their time doing, what they think about, what their goals are. All those kinds of things, before you've thought of them, you'll think, why am I doing this? This doesn't make sense. But as soon as you really know your character really well, little elements like what they wear, how they roll up a shirt sleeve, all those things start to just fall into place. Whereas originally it would have just been, I guess I'll draw his sleeves rolled up. Mm-hmm. But as you really think it through and start to get inside your character's head and understand who they are and why they act the way they act, then those things, like I said before, don't speak or act for your character. Learn who they are and see what they do. So then you're not the one who's deciding that. You're letting the character decide that, and that's where the character starts to become real.
I think that one of the things that this can actually do for you too is as an artist, if you're actually going through a list like this and actually filling out this almost like it's a form, it can actually push you to draw things that you have never drawn before and are probably not in your comfort zone. So they're going to stretch you as an artist, right?
Yeah.
And you're also going to figure out that you're drawing things that you didn't maybe necessarily start thinking that you would draw, because you made discoveries along the way before you started to do it.
Yeah, I think that just really like knowing all these things is that, like, if you had them all written down in some kind of a form that you developed, or I don't have anything like that, or I'd give it to you, but I think that you would start to realize things, and you're like, well, I could draw it that way because that's the way I've always drawn it, but it's not right in this case.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that as artists, I know I am definitely in a position where I am very locked down in the style, the way that I draw.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I really take the time to work out the way a character looks, it may force me into some areas that I'm not comfortable with, or that I don't generally just naturally draw because it's what I'm used to and what I feel like I do well. But it'll kind of force you down some paths where you'll get to learn some new stuff and try some new things, just because you're knowing things about the character before you're defining their look. An example I use for making a character seem real to you that I've talked about in my classes, and I think I brought this up at lunch a few days ago, was Kermit the Frog. I think Kermit, all the Muppets actually, but I'll just talk about Kermit. But they're really successful at feeling like real characters. To me, the Muppets seem as real as people. And when I think of, like, at the end of a day of making a Muppet movie, that somebody goes and puts Kermit in a box and locks him away in a warehouse, it makes me almost like sad and sick. Like, no, you can't do that to Kermit. He goes and sleeps in a bed like people. they've done such a good job at defining those characters and at making them seem real to us by seeing the way that they interact with other people, with other Muppets, and just like we've seen them go to bed, we've seen them go on trips, we've seen them go through all these different things, to the point where the thought of them just being a Muppet that somebody puts in a box at the end of the day is like upsetting. And those characters have become real. And if you can do that with a character you design, if you can make a character seem that level of real to people, then people love it. They'll go out of their way to support your character if the character seems so real that they like, please don't treat this thing badly that you've made. It's real to me now, so let it stay real.
I love this holistic approach to character design, where it's not just about the visual, but it's about, you know, personality and their strengths, weaknesses, all this stuff that goes into it, because it really does make you think through this character, right? It makes you,
yeah.
It makes you, and I guess I keep thinking all this stuff you're describing. I keep thinking about Missile Mouse is my own character that I've probably drawn the most. He has 2 graphic novels. He has, you know, another story, a short story, and I've just been drawing him for years. And it's true. I know exactly what he would always do. I know what he never does. I know what makes him unique, and I can actually put him in a situation, and I don't have to think, what would he do? I just know what he does, you know.
Yeah.
And it really does help. It helps how I pose the character, you know, how you know, even down to the style that I draw him in as well. Knowing all that background stuff helps.
Yeah, and when a character becomes real to you, nobody has to tell you whether the thing you're doing with it is right or wrong. Like, if the character that you just were telling me, like if the one that you've worked on, what did you say his name was?
Missile Mouse.
Missile Mouse. Like,
Yeah.
there's probably things that it would, like, if somebody else drew it and gave it to you, and even if it was in the exact same, like they somehow managed to match your style, but they had him doing something where, like, his facial expression, he looked like way more angry than he would normally get, or if he was like sobbing or something. Like, if he's doing something that's way out of character, you would just go, oh, you missed it. Like,
Yeah.
even if the drawing was perfect as far as your
Right.
style goes, it would still be wrong, and it's
Right.
not in the right character anymore.
Right. Or you know, that pose is way too cocky. You know.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
a good
and
point.
if you get to the point where you really get the character, then nobody has to tell you if it's right or not. Then the character kind of tells you if it's right or not. It's like, no,
Yeah.
he wouldn't do that. I know this guy. He would never ever do that. That's not in his nature.
Right.
So a good way to go if you're not sure about some of these things with defining character is to base it on someone you know, or on yourself, or on a combination of elements from various people who you know. Just drawing on your own personal experience is a great way to begin with a character. There's characters that, like, there's a lot of facial expressions and stuff that I've used where I'm like, oh, this guy I knew in high school, this is so him. I'm stealing this face that he used to do, and I'm putting it on this guy because this is who, as I draw this character, he's who I think of, and so that's what I'm doing.
Right.
Right.
So what would you say to a student who, or maybe not a student, but just any artist who is working on a project? Maybe it's a book, maybe it's a comic, maybe it's for an animation of some sort, and they can't answer these questions.
Like I said, there's a chance you could get your character design to just look really great and be full of life and just tell a whole story in just the way it looks. But I feel like that will come from an artist who's a lot better than I am.
I guess
I can't get.
I guess what I'm saying though is, like, I'm almost asking it rhetorically, is that you know, if you can't answer these, you don't know the story well enough, right? You don't know the project well enough.
Yeah, that's I could be wrong. I may not be thinking of every possible scenario, but my gut reaction to that question is that if you can't answer questions about how your character would react to different things, then you don't know them well enough to really put a model sheet together, or to like start like doing several pages of a book. I mean, you might get a really nice drawing and like, hey, this is pretty cool, but if like you may not be able to picture how they're going to act in different situations that are going to come, and that's fine. I think that I mean, if you look back at the first few episodes of some of your favorite TV shows, the characters aren't really nailed down yet.
That's right.
They fluctuate. Like if you look at the beginning of Seinfeld, Jerry was really casual, and he lived in kind of a scummy apartment, and Kramer's name was Kelso, and he was still crazy, but like things started to change, and they went, hey, you know what's funnier? It's funny when Jerry is a clean freak.
Right.
And it's funny when this happened, and they started to get better. And if you look at all the shows that eventually became really big, the first few episodes weren't really, the characters weren't on. They were still enjoyable in some way, but they weren't as good as they got as the show progressed, because the people writing the show started to understand the characters better and put them in, as the situations came to them, the way they reacted became more consistent and more accurate and funnier.
Well, I think what you're talking about here, though, probably applies to your number 1, number 2, number 3 characters. And I think maybe a character who just has a bit part, you could go into it all, you go this far into it. But I think, for me personally, I want to get a project done.
Yeah.
and I can't do this for every single character, but especially if I just know there's going to be a guy walking through the hallway in the background. I'm not worried about his hobbies, his strengths, what does he always do.
That's going too deep.
I just know this character in the background here. He's gonna maybe bump into my main character, and he's gonna be a big muscle guy, and that's all it needs, right?
Yeah.
But I think too, though, there's probably just some sort of natural. We kind of bring this naturally to characters as we draw them. We maybe even subconsciously think through this stuff without even asking ourselves these specific questions. Like if you know you're drawing a big, beefy muscle guy, there's some archetypes there that you're gonna deal with.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of value and strength actually in doing that. In like this whole list of questions, I don't think that's necessary for every character. And if you're doing something where it's just like a magazine thing, and they're like, okay, we need this character to look like he's in a rush. Like if you can even just ask, what are the key elements that you want me to convey? Like what is this character? Sum him up really, really quickly for me. If a character could be summed up really quickly because there's somebody who doesn't need to have that much depth for what you're working on, then only a few sentences are fine. If you're doing like a children's book where there's a lot more depth and there's supposed to be a lot more backstory, then I think that you do want to go into a little bit more of this kind of a longer list. But as long as you understand, as long as you understand the most important things of the character, then you're good. And then the question you ask yourself is, how many questions do I need to ask to really get to the source of to really understand who this is?
Yeah. Well, and I think that's a good point. When you're given an assignment, either it's a freelance job or it's a class assignment or something, and it might be that the person that you're doing it for already has all this information, and they sort of know what they want. You may be able to skip a few of these and just go straight to the aesthetics side of it.
Yeah, definitely.
I would say I've definitely been guilty, especially early on, of eliminating the thought process and just diving right in. And if I look at my earlier work in children's books, I see a lot of characters that really were not developed. A lot of things that I would do differently today, knowing what I know now and taking some of these things into consideration. But it's funny, I never had a character class in college. We never talked about this kind of stuff, and it's interesting because of how important it actually is,
Yeah.
But by the way, in animation, is this bigger in animation than illustration, since you did both, right?
Yeah, I think it is, because in animation generally it's not just what does it look like, but there is a whole story wrapped around them. A lot of things are going to happen to them, and so and their character design can obviously, even this works the same as in a book with several illustrations, where it's like your character can change a lot. the way that they act, the way that things influence them, their appearance can change throughout. But I think that probably the reason that a lot of this, when they asked me to teach the class at BYU, the character design class, and I kind of went really heavy this direction, I think that it was, I hope they were okay with me doing it. I mean, they had me teach the class several times, so they must have been okay with it. But I went a very animation direction with it, where I was going at it from way more of a backstory and a writing and like, let's make a movie out of this thing, not just let's make an image out of this thing. And so it's a very different way of looking at it, and I don't think it's something that probably everybody needs to, like, each time you do a character, like a quick character sketch, that you have to think, okay, well, I've got to sit down and do all this writing first. But I think there's value in it, and that's why I wanted to present this to that class, and that's why I thought it was worth doing for this thing, was just to kind of open your mind to, like, this is maybe how outside of illustration, how, like, possibly in animation they may approach working with designing characters.
No, it's really good. It's good to I think approach it like this, because I've done a few children's books where, you know, I've read through the whole book and I feel like, oh, I got this character. I know what they need. But if I was to maybe go into it a little bit deeper and ask the author, hey, what would this character never do? What would, you know, how does this character see himself? Those types of things that maybe the children's book didn't answer. It might be, oh, well, if this is the case, then I'm going to always draw this character's shirt dirty, you know. If it's a boy, you know, maybe he's not a clean freak. Maybe he's more of a scroungy kind of kid. And those are some things that I think going forward probably will apply to things that I'm doing.
Well, one thing I want to mention along those lines is if a person has written a book, then they feel as strongly about the character that they've written as you do about the character that you've illustrated a lot, where it's like they get it. And they get who the character is. They get what they would do. They get what they wouldn't do, all those kind of things. Yeah. And so you may avoid some review process by finding that out on the front end. They may think it's coming through in the book. They may think, no, I know who this character is. That's how. Isn't that coming through? But they can't articulate it because it isn't actually written in the book. And if you say, tell me more about this character than what I'm seeing in the book, then they may tell you things that will get you closer to the character on your first or second sketch and save you, you know, 12 or 20 different reviews where they're like, no, this isn't right. This isn't who I'm seeing. Because they probably have a vision in their mind of what it's going to be like. And the more you can understand of what they think the character is, the quicker you can get to that with your drawing.
Yeah.
So this, let me see why I was going to show this one. I wrote...
Bunny on Fire.
See, character design can tell a story on its own, even if it's standing still in an empty room. So he's not standing still in an empty room. But what I was trying to show with this one was that the fox is that he's confident. I mean, that he's very relaxed, like that he's kind of arrogant, but not really like, ha ha, look, I caught you, but just like this is just his normal business day. He caught the rabbit and the Easter bunny, and now he's making some Easter eggs.
And you
for
could
himself.
have taken it. You could have taken it a bunch of different directions. Like he could be like conniving, like he's whoa, ha ha ha, you know, that type of thing. You could even have the rabbit in the back there, you know, scheming, like he's going to figure out how to get out of this situation. But
there's just hundreds of ways it could have gone.
Yeah, but what you have here, I mean, it definitely shows the personalities. Like, you know, the rabbit's maybe a bit of a pushover. He's like, oh shoot. This fire's getting worse.
Yeah, and the fox isn't even like peeking back to make sure he's still there. He's like, well, here we go. Just gonna have myself some. I guess it's breakfast.
Good omelet.
Breakfast for eggs. And I've got a few other images here. These are just to kind of show that you can learn a lot about a character just from the pose, from the expression, from just the scene. Like this, based on like how pretty much every pirate movie I've ever seen, all the pirates are singing and dancing. I don't know why pirates come across as so jolly.
It's the rum. It's gotta be the
that's
rum.
probably true.
If you've ever tried rum, it just makes you jolly.
Here's my mountain lion. I just wanted him to look stoic and kind of detached from the world, like a mountain man. This dog, I think you get a sense of who the dog is from just this one sketch. as compared to a lot of other dogs, how they would possibly look. He just obviously gets into things and very scraggly and
Probably knows how to get a few things
not very,
done.
yeah. Pigs
Banjo pig.
dancing in the field, yeah. Little Guy Francis there. I actually drew this before I even knew Guy was doing that, and I saw that
really?
and I was like, well, I'll submit this. I've
That's
got banjo pigs.
It's just a natural. It's a natural to put a banjo and a pig together.
Yeah, you can't help it.
Now
You
this
got
guy,
banjos, you got pigs, it's going to happen.
he is in love
So,
with this girl.
yeah, kind of King Kong based. Mostly I was just going for a feeling of love in his eyes that I was trying to show the size of him and just that he's not intimidating even though he's that much bigger.
Mm-hmm.
This was kind of my mockery of country music. Nothing against people who like country music. I'm just not a huge fan, but I thought it was fun to draw because I've seen guys who you can't see any of their face except for their lower lip and chin because of the mustache and eyebrows and hair, and it's just like this big, hairy, bushy face. So with all these, I'm just trying to like have some kind of character come through in the what's going on, in the facial expression. Obviously, all these things could be drawn very differently and present a very different type of character.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good one.
But I'm kind of playing on some things that I think people just automatically understand. Like with this one, you know, people handing out puppies from a cardboard box out in front of Walmart or something.
Mm-hmm.
But also based on the fact that bunnies multiply like crazy, so these guys are just handing out their own.
So my question with and the worthless education. My question here is: Are these were these done for anything in particular? Are these just assignments you gave yourself? Like, was it for a blog or?
Yeah, these are all just things I did for my blog, just for fun.
Uh-huh.
Just things I was thinking about, and I when I'm doing stuff for my blog where I just want to give this a shot, it's mostly to see if I can communicate the idea. Most of the time it's a gag, like
Mm-hmm.
this might be kind of funny, but it will only be funny, at least to me, if the expression is correct,
Right.
and if the animal is correct, and if the pose is correct, and if the location is correct. You'll see from the stuff that I flipped through that I'm not a big fan of doing backgrounds. I've never been very excited about layout drawing.
Well, you're a character guy. You don't need to make any apologies for that. They have background.
Yeah, I do storyboards, so as long as my expressions and my gestures are decent, then it's sufficient. Let's see. So then I've got these I threw in here because I was doing a thing for my brother-in-law. He has a dog daycare business in Las Vegas, and he wanted to do some marketing. He wanted to add some drawings of dogs to their website and just kind of liven it up a little bit. And so he said, will you do some dog drawings? And so I did a couple of the drawings just on a piece of paper for him, and he said, I kind of like this one. And it had a nose that was similar to what all these had. It had similar eyes, and but I wanted to give him a selection, like, tell me which direction is correct. So you can see that the nose is pretty much the same on all of them, just different placement, shapes, sizes. The eyes are pretty much the same, just moved around on the face. The shapes, I'm just screwing around with some stuff to see what he likes. Mm-hmm. I liked number 10 the best, but he said that one was too Snoopy-like. He didn't want one that stood up on two legs like that. And so he ended up deciding he liked 5. And so I did a couple more drawings.
I was looking at 5 a lot. It's funny that
you
like 5.
Yeah,
and
I was drawing 5.
He said that one was the way he liked it the best, and so I kind of refined it a little bit, did some other drawings, and we ended up going with something like this. This was kind of who that became. And so he made some T-shirts and put some of these on his website. But then he said that he saw some of my other stuff on my blog, and he said that he didn't know if he liked the eyes on this one as much. He said, some of your other stuff has more character, so I wanted to see if we can do something that isn't quite as streamlined and is a little bit more, a little bit closer to an actual, like, cartoony dog and not quite as stylized. And so then we settled on this guy, which was based on a dog that, I don't know what breed this is, but he sent me a picture, and this was how the dog was colored, with the black on the one side of the face and the white on the other. And I really liked the way the dog looked, and so we went this direction with it. And this dog ended up all over their marketing materials, and he's kind of become their mascot for their business.
I think that's Will's dog.
It does look like a border collie a little bit.
Is that what kind it is?
Well, the black and white.
So he had all these ideas, and he's like, I want him in this kind of thing for this, like the map with the upside down map. That he wanted a drawing on the page that said directions, so you could find where the business was. So I just did a bunch of stuff like this for him. These are just a handful of the dogs, and then he liked those so much they said, well, let's do more dogs, so it doesn't look like we only have one dog here. So it ended up just being this huge series of like a whole bunch of dog drawings, but it was kind of fun, and they all kind of fit into the same world. I tried to keep them kind of in the same style. I went away from that original kind of streamlined dog and went into this more, I don't know what you'd call it. It's closer to a Disney or Looney Tunes style, but not quite there. But he wanted something that just kind of would make his website look cool.
Your first dog design was more comic strip dog, and this is more animated feature animation dog.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's cool.
So here's a few others, and then he wanted to see how they look sad, so there they are. That was for a card that he sent out. This thing, obviously, not a dog. The only reason I wanted to show this one was because of the hat. I drew this thing, and I was trying to draw an imaginary friend. I can't remember why I was doing this, but I drew it, and I was like, man, it's just not right. I don't like it. And I put a big smile on him. I put him in different poses, and nothing was right. And then I gave him that hat, and it wasn't just an arbitrary, well, maybe a hat. I thought he needs to look like he is somebody who should be fun but isn't, but feels like he is fun because he's done this. And so like just by putting that hat on, that he's like, okay, now we're having a good time. And I felt like the expression and just the way he's standing and all that worked really well as soon as I put that hat on. But the hat wasn't just a, well, I guess I'll put a funny looking hat on him. I actually like had a reason to put that on. And that's why I wanted to show this, just to mention, like, as far as when it comes to costuming your character or really any little thing, if something's wrong, it doesn't mean the whole design is wrong. Sometimes it's just a little element that's missing, where you could say so much about your character if you just added the one thing or changed the smile a little bit or changed the eyes a little bit. Little tiny changes sometimes make a huge difference. Yeah. As long as they are, like, they're made with consciously, that you understand why you think you're trying them, and not just, I guess, a hat. And maybe sometimes that works. Maybe you realize something after you've done it. But I really put that one on intentionally because I thought it would help.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have, here, let me show this next section. These are, I had a whole bunch of these, but I narrowed it down to 5. I consider these some of the things I did for my blog that I think are bad designs because I didn't think them through. I think that the desert here is, like, you get a sense that they're kind of lost in the middle of nowhere. This guy doesn't look like he's lost. He just looks confused. I don't know what he's doing. And this horse, if this horse really is as famished as I was hoping he would be, I could have had his lower lip kind of hanging out so he looked like he was like panting and sweating, and it would have really helped to kind of come in like this and then cut in so he looked like he was starving.
Right.
Like I could have also made his tail a little bit more scraggly and a little bit more like it's just been dirty, and I think that his hair here, I could have had more hairs coming out. There's maybe a lot I could have done with this.
Maybe a few bones on the ground somewhere in the background. Maybe just.
Yes. Yeah, there's a lot. It's not thought through. I just drew something. I just sat down, grabbed a pencil, and I was like, this. And
so
it didn't go anywhere.
And the guy's expression, what is he thinking in this one?
It's I drew this the day that on my way to work I had heard America's Horse with No Name. So he is going through the desert on a horse with no name. So he's trying to figure out what the horse's name is because he can't remember. But that gag isn't paying off. It's not clear. There's so much about this that I don't like that I almost deleted it from my blog because I'm like, this isn't conveying what I was trying to convey, and I don't like it.
Yeah.
But I left it on there because I'm like, well, there's value in leaving stuff on that I'm not too proud of too, because, you can learn from it.
That's first season of Seinfeld stuff right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then this one, I like this drawing, I like the idea. I like what I was trying to do with it, but the rabbit bothers me. The one thing that I feel is right about the rabbit is this one whisker that is kind of off. But I should have had his bow tie kind of undone and his jacket kind of coming off. He should look like he's panicked for a while, because for the tortoise to have this many, why did I just lose the word for those?
Chips.
I'm not a gambler.
Yeah.
Chips. There we are. For him to have that many chips, he's been winning for a long time, and so I should have had him look a lot more frazzled than he does. I think it's coming through a little bit in the big eyes and in the way that he's holding his mouth, but the hair could be a lot crazier.
Maybe some sweat.
The way that his suit is, the buttons could be coming undone. He could have, like, the sleeve could be coming down over his hand more. He should look like his appearance is way down the list of things he's concerned about right here. And so although I like the idea and I like some things about the way it turned out, I feel like I missed the mark on the hair. He's not as funny as he could be.
I think the turtle's great.
Yeah, and I was just going for old gambler there with the very
he looks confident,
straight face.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's my problems with that one, mostly the hair. This one, I think my biggest problem, this is chumming for humans. But I don't like that nostril. Should have left that off or put it somewhere else. And I think the eye is too small. And I think that this line right here that separates the dark from the light, it's too much along the same line as the smile. There's a lot about that just, it irks me. I look at it and I'm like, I messed up on that shark. I don't like him. And so that one is another one that I look at now on my blog and I'm like, oh, geez, I don't like that. This one I don't like because I don't think this looks like a dog. It's supposed to be a dog. If you look at the stuff I just showed you that I did for my brother-in-law, that's a lot more like a dog. This is kind of some weird mix between a dog and, like, Jerry from Tom and Jerry or something. I don't know. It's I like the idea. I like mostly where it went. I do not like that dog one bit. And then this one, I really like the way this guy turned out. I like the expression. I like the pose. But I have no idea what's going on in this picture. I just started drawing, and it went nowhere, and you can tell. It's like, why is he holding a skull? Why is it upside down? Why is his hat flying off? This guy looks the way everybody looking at this picture does. It's like, I don't understand this at all. So I wanted to show this one just as an example. It's good to have an idea of what you're doing before you start drawing. Sometimes the nice drawing comes out of just sitting down and sketching, but sometimes you get this, where it's like, I don't know what happened there.
So one of the what I get you if I can get my words right, what I hear you saying is to be deliberate in what you're trying to say visually, right? So instead of being more ambiguous, and you some of those you were doing for fun, so you didn't really have a clear direction to go in anyway. But sometimes you can see illustrations that people have done. And you don't know what's going on.
Every drawing benefits from having a clear intent, knowing what you're like. What is the point of this? Just I'm going to draw a horse with no name. That wasn't enough. I needed to figure out more. I needed to go deeper than that, and that's why I feel like that's weak. And so I think that if you know what you're trying to convey, what the design of the character, the design of the scene, just whatever it is you're trying to get across, you need to figure out what the best way is to convey that and try to get all of that into it, or it falls short and it appears weak.
It's interesting. I'll just interject that I got picked to be a juror on the Society of Illustrators West competition right now, and I'm actually going through this week. I've been going through all the images, and it's interesting to read the description of what it was used for, and then to look at the image, and you can just right away go yes or no based on what they were going for. That, boy, I would not, that totally misses, or wow, that's spot on. And it really affects my decisions on, what to put in or not.
Yeah. All right, so we just arrived at Buster Bluth. I am not a great caricature artist, but I wanted to talk just really quickly about caricature art, because I think that there's a lot that you can learn just by considering the way that they work and what works with them and what doesn't. caricature artists advertise themselves, like if you've ever seen one in an amusement park, or like there's some in casinos or at fairs, but they advertise themselves with a big wall full of celebrity caricatures, because then you're like, oh, I can see that they're good. But what doesn't come across in that is that we all know those celebrities. And like I was saying with Michael Jackson, the Michael Jackson caricature I saw, when I saw that smile on him, I was like, well, that's wrong. That's not him at all. It looks like him, but the expression's wrong, and therefore they miss the point. And so most people who then like see this wall of caricatures of celebrities and they say, I want to get one of these for myself, they get theirs and they look at it and they go, oh man, he's not as good as the stuff that he posted. I guess he just hung that up because it's his best stuff he's ever done. But that's not the case. I think the problem is that the caricature artist doesn't know who you are.
Yeah.
They don't know.
They know the celebrities a lot more than they know the strangers.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, we have, whether it's accurate or not, we have preconceived ideas of who these celebrities are based on characters they've played. And so we can look at a picture and go, oh yeah, that's who they are to me, and that's who they are to most people. But what made me think of this is my uncle got a caricature of himself, I believe it was at Knott's Berry Farm or somewhere when I was a kid. And I remember seeing it, and I looked at it, and I was like, well, this looks like him, kind of, but it's not right. And what I ended up deciding was that the thing that wasn't right about it was that he had a little smirk on his face, and I had never seen my uncle do that. My uncle was very serious and like really no nonsense, and that smirk, I was just like, well, I don't know who you drew, but that's not who it is. And so they can nail a celebrity's caricature because they're not basing the drawing just on outward appearance. They're basing it on more than that. They're basing it on personality and outward appearance. So, you know, they can ask you what sport do you like, but they won't ask you, so are you like miserable all the time? Or, you know, that's the kind of stuff that we think we know about celebrities, but it's the kind of thing that you can't just get by looking at somebody.
Right. You should interview all the family members before setting down to do a caricature.
You're like, I want a caricature, and they're like, okay, we fill out these forms. It'll be about 12 hours.
That could be an interesting argument there on the boardwalk.
Yeah.
So I got a handful of my Arrested Development, and then this was my drawing of Lost. This was about halfway through the series when I was just completely confused by it. Had no idea what was going on. This just sums up my feelings on that show.
I don't think the writers. I think the writers were lost also.
Yeah, I think they were. That was just. This is not really a caricature of any one person. It's just like this is all of the American gladiators to me.
Yeah,
just a whole bunch of upper body. This is everybody at a truck stop. There's just old man. Like some of these are just. I'm just going for like some basic kind of everybody's. This is John Denver. I'm a big John Denver fan, so I worked a while on that one. I ended up finally deciding that the way to make him look the most like John Denver was to go make him look like a Muppet. So I believe John Denver was a Muppet. Awesome. And then here's my Mary Poppins and Bert. This one, this image was I wanted to mention. Okay, for one, Mary Poppins never smiles that big in the film, and I know that. She does little grins and things, but I did little grins on her, and it didn't feel right. And so I ended up going this way. But the reason I wanted to show this one is because this leads me into my the next thing I wanted to mention, which is drawing from memory. I did not look at visual reference for this. I drew, well, I did on the costumes. I did on Mary Poppins' costume because I wanted to make sure I was getting that right. But as far as their faces, I just drew. I thought, okay, I believe this is what Dick Van Dyke kind of looks like. But I didn't want to be thrown off by what he actually looks like. I wanted my impression of his appearance to dictate where the design went. And I explained this to you a little bit when we were talking at lunch, Will, but I want to kind of get into this. I'll try to get through it a little bit quickly. But when I'm drawing a character, before I look at any reference, I do some rough sketches. And this is characters, this is animals, places, really anything. I want to see where my mind goes before I introduce the reference. Because reference can make you think something that you didn't think before, and the thing you thought before, your intuition, your impression of, I think this is what this looks like, is sometimes, even though it's not exactly right, in a lot of cases, your own impression of what a person or an animal or a place looks like will seem more accurate to your audience than an exact replica of its actual appearance because they are dealing with the same things in their head that you're dealing with, which is, this is my impression of what this animal looks like. It may not be accurate, but our minds are influenced by all of the different versions of these things we've seen. So like we were talking about before when you mentioned like Jerry from Tom and Jerry, and there's like Gus and Jacques and Mighty Mouse. If you compare these mice to an actual mouse, they don't really look like a mouse. They look like Mickey Mouse, and Mickey Mouse doesn't look like a mouse, but Mickey influenced the way that a lot of cartoon mice were designed. Like Speedy Gonzales, I think, is another. He's very similar to the way that Jerry looks, the way that Mickey looks. There's some things that are mouse-like about these characters, but it is not like they sat down with a real mouse and drew from that. And so people are influenced by the way that they think a character or an animal or something like that looks, just as much as they are by the way it actually looks. Because even if it's wrong, if it's everyone's impression, it becomes right, at least in the minds of your audience. Mm-hmm. So does that make sense? I mean, it's weird. Yeah. It's a weird approach.
Actually, a fun exercise to do is to draw a character from memory. Go draw Charlie Brown. Go draw SpongeBob, and see how off model it is, but how dead on personality-wise it is. You know.
Yeah.
What's the value in that for Jake? Is it to teach you that you're not as bad as you think you are, or you're worse than you think you are, or to be more observant?
Yeah, the value I think there is for me personally, when I've done this with students and done it myself, it's these characters are successful for a certain reason. Mm-hmm. It's the design coupled with the personality, mm-hmm. and what you remember from that can tell you what is the appealing factor or the really attention getting or the unique thing about that character. So you draw SpongeBob, everyone remembers he's a square, right? And that's important. You don't draw SpongeBob round, but you draw him as a square. But then you maybe not get right the eye. You don't get the eyes right, or you don't get the mouth right. But there's certain features that you do get right. And Charlie Brown's another one that's super simple, and you know exactly what he looks like until you sit down to draw him. And then you're like, wait, is his ear up here or is it down here? Well, he does have a big round head, you know, and so you might get the expression right. You might get that he looks forlorn and that he's like this kind of loser character, but he's way off model. And so it's just shows that when you go to sit down to do your own character, what are the things that are going to be appealing or unique enough that someone will remember those down the road and make your character memorable. So that's the value in that exercise or that assignment.
Yeah, that's great. I'm going to try that. You just inspired me. I want to start drawing things. I'm just going to start drawing and see what my impression of these things is.
Go draw He-Man, you know.
Yeah. But so what I do is I draw first, and then I compare my own interpretation of how something looks with actual reference and settle on some middle ground. Like, okay, well, I like what I did here. I think this is how most people will picture this, but the nose on this animal is way off or something like that. So I've got a few drawings like that. These are drawings that I did without looking at any reference at all, and I was just like, that's fine. Like, this is supposed to be a wee dog, and I was like, that says it to me. It's fine, and it's good enough. He's got kind of a pointy face and a long body, and that's what I think of them. That's supposed to be a groundhog. Do groundhogs have noses like that? I have no idea. I'm sure they don't have hands. I don't know. There's a lot about this that I've never even looked to see if this is accurate. I'm just like, that to me is a groundhog. So there you go. That's a manatee. I drew this to my team was the Handsome Manatees, my fantasy basketball team, and so I won the championship, and I drew this to taunt everybody so I could email it out to them. I didn't look at any koalas for this, but I knew that their noses were roughly that shape and that they had big ears like that, and I just felt like they were kind of lumpy and pillow-like. Pigs,
so these
this
are
isn't at all how pigs look.
So you must...
What was that?
They're all from memory then?
Yes. Yeah, these are just based on my impressions of what they look like.
So you're probably more observant than most people. Is that, would you say that's
I was wondering, I was just thinking about this just in the last week sometime, and I thought that I wondered if I have something close to a photographic memory, because if I have seen the name of an artist who sings a song on my iPod, I can remember it. Like,
Really?
I have to see it, though. And not like, you know, I know some people if they sing it, but if I've got songs that were only by like one person, and it's one person who lived like 50 years ago, and I've got nothing else from them, and I would have no reason to know their name otherwise, if I hear the song and recognize the title, I can immediately say who's singing it. So
Oh man.
maybe I have some form of like a really weird memory, but I'm also
I would
just
say you do.
Yeah. That's like savant-like.
we just found out I'm insane. That's nice. But I'm also, I feel like I'm really observant, not just with how things look, but with how things act, how people stand, how like I said, facial expressions of people I knew as far back as high school, where I can recall these things, and I'm like, I remember the way he'd do his eyes like that, and so I try to like capture some of those things. But I don't think pigs look very much like these. Obviously not the ones standing there in the clothes, but you can tell they're pigs. It's close enough. Those are supposed to be otters and a gator, and again, just I think that's what I think of when I think of otters. These may be more like river rats or something. I don't even know. If you were to compare them to the real animal kingdom, that may not be an otter at all, but that's my impression of what an otter looks like. That's how I figure a fat eagle would look.
That's funny.
That polar bear is way off. This goes way back. This is like many, many years old, but I still like the concept. I should redraw it now because I really don't like the way, like especially that bear's feet, just ugly. Those buffalo I just drew, knowing that they have very bulky bodies, big heads. I know their noses are about that. This is giving me a home where the buffalo roam. It's in the way of your TV viewing. Killer whale, again, I just knew about the shape of it and where I don't know as far as like a little nose ridge if they have that, but I thought they did, and I liked the way it looked with that, so I left it. Donkey, this is mostly coming from my impressions I've gotten from cartoons and from comic strips and stuff. Didn't look at any reference for that, just thought, okay, I know they have long pointy ears, I know that their noses are about like this, and I want them to have big buck teeth. So I'm just kind of like guessing my way through all these things. That's a better polar bear. Not great, but he's better. The unicorn, obviously, that's not how horses are shaped, but that's how I wanted him to be shaped. There was enough about him that I felt like, you know, you put a big horn on his head, he's a unicorn. So
it's a donkey corn.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. So it's not accurate where people could just look at that and go, oh, well, he's obviously drawing a horse-like animal. But there's enough. He's got a mane, he's got a tail, he's got hooves. There's enough about it that I think it relates well enough to an audience that they understand what I'm doing. I could probably benefit from looking at a little more reference than I'm doing. I'm just...
Well, but you have, right?
Most of these I'm just trying to sell the gag.
You have looked at reference. You just memorized it more than most people.
Yeah.
Yeah, that may be true. I'm just memorizing my reference. I'm always telling people I don't look at reference. I've just memorized it all.
It's interesting. So when I worked at Blue Sky, Peter DeSev had an office there. He worked on site a few days out of the week, and I'd go in there to see what he's doing, and he'd be designing a bear character, and his wall would just be plastered with bear photographs. Just all different kinds of, bears sleeping, bears running, bears fishing, and close-ups and far away, and then he'd have all these drawings of just where he's trying to get that bear down, and capturing that essence of it. So it's interesting how different artists works.
And his work looks so effortless. I would have thought that he's just drawing it out of his head.
No, that guy, he does a lot of homework. That's for sure.
This is probably why we've heard of Peter DeSev and not of me. There's obviously a ton of value in using reference. But and I'm gonna get to that in just a second. I just want to say for this part, for like just as a trial, just to see if you benefit from doing this, I would just say trust your instincts and draw what you feel, because sometimes there's something right about it that maybe you'll be able to just kind of merge it in with your reference. then
well, can I add a part?
yeah,
I guess a punchline for the Peter DeSev thing. So he would do all that, and then at some point, all that stuff would go away, and he'd have the information, and he'd have a few drawings of bears, and then he'd just go and figure out what's the essence of it and what is this thing. And if you look at something like Sid the Sloth, which he designed, you know, you look at a sloth and you look at Sid, and they are very different in what they, you know, very different looking. But you never question that Sid is a sloth. You're just like, oh, he's a sloth. He's got enough to him that makes him a sloth or a prehistoric sloth. But the rest is just an appealing design that fits his personality.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what you're doing here too. Is and these aren't meant to be masterpieces. These are, you know, obviously you're trying to tell a gag, and you're probably doing it on limited time, right? I mean, if it's after work and it's for your blog, you can't be spending, you know, a month working on one of these. And so I think getting the gist of it and not being too faithful to what reference is, but getting the essence of what the reference is, I think is good. I think it makes your characters more appealing and more, you know, to the point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's what it comes down to, is essence. And there's a lot to be said for understanding what you're drawing to. You don't want to just, I think it looks like this, and then just like go with the first thing you come up with.
Right.
You want to make sure there's some something relatable to it that people can look at and go, oh, okay, I get what he's doing.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, drawing effectively from memory requires that you just kind of pay attention a lot of the time. I went through a whole weird phase. Man, I hate those background trees. I really should have redone those. But I did those in obviously like 12 seconds or so. But I went through a series on my blog where I got kind of obsessed with animal jug bands, and so I thought I'd show those really quick, just because I think that with each character I was thinking, what about this character, how do I want this character playing this instrument? So the lion's obviously having a good time, the elephant's having a pretty good time, the zebra's very intense. The penguin's really relaxed, the walrus really happy. So I was just kind of going with, like, what do I want this character to be, and how do they react to playing this instrument?
Oh my gosh.
Wait,
dolphin.
You're going too fast.
Sorry.
That's a great idea on the
back.
dolphin.
Yeah, the dolphin playing with his blowhole. And then, like the koala here is, because the one thing I know about koalas is they don't spend a lot of time on the ground, and they are always hanging on tree branches. I was like, well, he's ideal then for the hanging on to the little wooden stick there that's nailed to, and the kangaroo up on his tail. And so I look at the animal and I think, what's fun about this animal, and what do I want to do with it to have it playing this instrument? Mostly I think that what I liked about this whole series of just doing jug bands was that I was actually I didn't have to think, what is this character doing? I already knew.
Right.
And so I just got to like play with them having fun, making music with their friends in whatever situation I put them in.
Now I'm going to go, I'll also have this desire to go look up jug bands on YouTube after this class.
Yeah, I did a ton of these. I don't know, like this basically killed my blog, because these took longer than anything I'd ever done on my blog. But I was like, you know what, I'm having a fun time, and so jug bands it is. And
and what were the comments like?
This one, I started losing people, but people were like, man, these are really great. But I think they were kind of like, why is he crazy?
Why is he obsessed with these?
What makes him think we all want to see animal jug bands all the time?
Here's the thing: you probably lost some people, but the people that hung around, those are like true fans. Those are people who get you.
That's true. What I liked about this one is that none of them are really happy and having a good time. I had done a sketch where the chimpanzee had a big smile on his face, and I thought, no, you know what? What I think of when I think of apes is a very serious curiosity, where it's like, you know, you see them in the zoo, they like throw some lettuce into them, and even though they've seen lettuce before, they still go over to it and they seem to like pick it up and search it and look around. they're always picking at things and trying to figure things out, and so that's where I went with this one. I was like, okay, these guys are experimenting and still learning. Even if they've been playing in this jug band for years, I wanted that ape side of them to come through. And so, like I said, that's what was fun with these, is I just actually got to sit and think, okay, I don't have to worry about what they're doing. I just get to go, if this thing was in a jug band, what instrument would it play and how would it play it?
Right, right.
So it was oh, in fact, let me skip to this one. This was my first sketch of a griffin for my fantasy jug band, and I thought, okay, but griffins seem kind of regal and serious, and like this, even though I kind of liked some things about it, I probably would have redrawn a little bit. It was wrong, and I ended up settling on this, where the griffin is staring straight ahead, and he's very, very serious about how he plays the banjo. He's still playing it. He's still in the band, but his has a very different approach to doing it than this one does. So, and this is all just personality stuff. I'm just messing with things. I'm like, I wonder if I can convey what I want this character to be in a drawing, and can I get people to see it for what I want it to be?
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Why did I have this? Oh, okay. These are just a few things I have for like drawing from experiences, drawing from life. So I drew this one after my wife had a miscarriage, and I was just feeling sad, and I was just like, you know what, I'm just going to get my feelings onto a drawing. So I just had some cats that are staring at a ball that has nobody to play with it. It's kind of manipulative emotionally. It's like, oh, that's so sad. But I wasn't trying to make people sad. I was just trying to, I wanted to get it out of my system, and this drawing actually helped. I did that, and I was like, okay, now I've been able to explain how I feel. Whereas this one is based on my daughter pounding on me while I'm doing other things. And there's actually a few that are kind of along these lines. There's this one. This is how my wife looks when she's taking our kids around. Too many things to carry, too many people pulling you too many different ways. And then there is somebody who has...
One of them is like loving her.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, hugging her foot. And then this lion here is, see, it's too much to handle. And then this is, I drew this after we went to a BYU football game where I decided that they need to start charging by the inch and not by the seat, because I was very outmatched for size. It's the most uncomfortable game of my life. I drew this one when I'd gotten pretty big, and I was like, I'm going to lose some weight. And so I'd see people eating good food, and I was like, oh my gosh, I really just want to eat burgers and fries. So this was kind of therapeutic in that way, where I was just like, I'm just going to draw how I feel about this one. This one is based on a story, and I'll tell you in a second why I wanted to show this one. But the story is that there was a guy who owned a motel near Niagara Falls. This was a bunch of years ago. And for a publicity stunt, he bought an old boat, put a pirate flag on it, made it look like a pirate ship, and then they put a buffalo, 2 bears, 2 raccoons, a dog, and a goose in it. And they were going to send it over Niagara Falls, and they wanted everybody to come stay in the motel so they could watch this just insane cruelty to animals that you'd never get okayed now. Like, can you imagine how people would react to this?
When was this?
This was in like 1830 something. It was somewhere around then. It was a long time ago. But wow. I heard about the story, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's so terrible. So this is kind of a memorial, but also it was just like such a crazy story to me. I was like, I want to do something with this.
And it actually happened?
Yeah, they went through with it. They tied the animals down, and the bears got out and escaped. So the bears survived because they never went over the falls. But I believe the rest of them went down with the boat, and the goose, they found the goose floating in the water at the base of the falls, but they didn't ever see the other animals again. So that's a sad ending to this story. But I wanted to do this drawing because I was like, those poor animals. They're like, hey, we're in a boat. what a great, we're pirates. What a fun day. And so this bear is like pointing. He's like, hey, look, we're in the water. And this one's looking at his reflection. And these two are everybody's just having the time of their life, except for the goose who sees the falls coming up. and that was where I wanted to go with this one. I was like, okay, everybody can't be happy or it's not funny.
Right.
But if one of them sees the impending doom, then there's something kind of funny. And it's not a funny story. It's kind of funny. It's kind of sad. It's kind of awful. It's just so many things.
You're the same guy who drew a bunny juggling chicks. So
that's true. So yeah, those I just wanted to go through those quickly and just show you some things. Okay, I wanted to show these because these are the ones that I actually did use reference, where I was like, I think I know what a turkey looks like, but I'm going to look at some things. And so you'll see that these actually have a little bit more form to them. They're a little bit closer to what they actually are. Mm-hmm. You can see that I'm not just guessing my way through, but coming a little bit more, it's a little more accurate. So there's definitely value in both ways. I think you need to know how something looks really, really well, or you can't draw it.
Right.
And just like with life drawing, the better you get at drawing something the way it actually looks, the better you'll be at stylizing it and doing something different with it.
Right.
Okay, and then I've got one other thing here. I've got this experiment that I'm in the middle of. Oh wait, I'm on the wrong drawing. Here. Oh, and that one I used reference, even though you would never know because chickens don't look like that at all. But I was like, is it a comb that it's called on its head, or I don't know what that is. But I was like, I just want to see what one looks like, so I looked at reference for that. But the experiment that I'm in the middle of, I decided several years ago that I was going to just try this thing where I would find out if I could make people care about a polar bear that doesn't exist by adding him to our Christmas cards year after year. And so here is the first year that I did this. I think it was like 5 or 6 years ago. So I was like, okay, I'm going to put a bear in, and he's going to be really young, and we're just going to pretend that he's real. And I'm going to send the Christmas card out. I'm not going to say anything about him. He's just going to be there. And then the next year, he's going to be a little bit older. He's going to grow a little bit. And I never said anything about this, but then people started asking me. They're like, I named him Beauregard, and so on the Christmas cards it says all of our names, and it says and Beauregard. And so people keep asking, like I'll see them, or like they'll message me on Facebook or something, and they're like, I'm excited to see Beauregard in your Christmas card this year. This one worked really well because my youngest daughter was looking at who knows what, and I was like, well, that's where we put the bear. So the bear is getting older, and he's aging with the kids. He obviously grows a lot faster as a polar bear than the kids do. But the reason that I'm doing this, and this is the thing that's going to really upset a lot of people, is I want to see if I can make people care so much about something that doesn't exist that when I kill it, it actually makes them really mad at me.
Oh my gosh.
And so we're going to do this for like 5 more years, and then we're going to have one where all of us are sitting on this big cartoon bear rug. Oh. And what I expect to happen is I think that everybody's going to be really, really mad at me, and I'm going to get this just terrible backlash. And it's all just as part of like this 10 to 12-year experiment that I'm just doing to see if I can make someone care about a character that never existed.
That's cool.
And I encourage all of you to do the same because it's going to be really funny to see how mad people get because they really care about this thing.
You should send this into Buzzworthy or something, don't you think? I think some website would want to pick that up.
I'm definitely, as soon as it's done, when I have the complete series, I'm definitely going to have to publish it somewhere because with all of us sitting on the bear rug at the end, it's going to make people really mad. And then people have said, well, then you should introduce a new pet. And I was like, people would never want to see that pet. If I put in a new cartoon pet, they're just going to be mad that I'm going around making new characters and killing them. Let's see. Okay, and then I've got this one last thing. The goal of character design. The goal in all of character design, as far as I'm concerned, is to create a character that seems real. And the way that you do that is through relatability. If your character is relatable to an audience, then they can care about it. Your audience needs to be able to recognize what it is. They need to be able to identify with it. They need to like it. Even if it's a villain, even if it's like not supposed to be likable in the story or in the way that you're presenting it, there has to be something likable about it and something that they identify with, or they will lose interest in your character. and move on. But if they can really like cling to it the way that like we've talked about, like the Seinfeld gang, or like think of your favorite movies, your favorite TV shows, your favorite books, anything that has a character in it that you really identify with, that's your favorite thing because you relate. It's relatability, and that's what makes a character stand out. That's what makes a character come to life beyond what a drawing can ever do, is that ability to really understand what it's like. And relatability, I looked this up because I just wanted to see what it said and see if it gave me any other insight, and I really liked what it said. To make a connection between two or more things, so it's your connection between what you've drawn and the audience, and the other element of it is to understand and like or have sympathy for someone or something. And so relatability, if you can make someone understand what you've done and like it, or at least have sympathy for it, or at least understand what it is, then you've got a good character. If you can find a way to pull that off, then you've already succeeded as a character designer. It doesn't matter whether your character exists in a drawing or in a book that you've written, or in just even a bedtime story that you tell your kids, or just in your Christmas cards or in your mind, or whatever the case. If the character seems real, if you've made people believe that it's real, then you're already successful as a character designer. And if you can design one character successfully, then you can design more. The key is to understand for yourself who that character is, and then to make that relatable to everybody else. So when they look at it, they go, I get who this is, and I understand it, and I like it in some form. It doesn't have to be that they love everything about it, but if they like your character, then your character is successful.
That's a great way of putting it.
Bravo. Yeah, I mean, that's usually what the opening scene in most movies and animated films is all about. It's like, you know, up where they walk, up where they run, up where they play all day in the sun. You know, she wants to be part of their world, right?
Yeah.
Belle wants to be, you know, out of this small town, and to be able to have that in your mind while you are designing that character, you know, you can just you put that longing in their eyes, or that sort of content, or whatever. Yeah, that's important.
Yeah, if you can make somebody care about something that you've drawn, then to me that's success.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting that you say that too, because that's one of my litmus tests for a movie. When I go and see a feature film, and I'm sitting there, and often it's because one of my kids wanted to see it, so it's often not a movie that I chose to see. And one of my tests is, do I care about these characters? And there was a movie we saw just the other day, and I'm not going to name the name of it, but I did not care. The first part of the movie was really cool, and the second part completely lost me. And it felt like the actors were overacting and trying to manipulate my emotions, which even made me more, not angry, but just like, gosh, I could have sit through another hour of this, you know. And I didn't care. And then other movies, when you sit there and you realize, oh, that's right, I'm in a movie theater at some point, because you've completely been lost in the story, which means you've been lost in the characters, right?
Yeah.
And everything is kind of working to create that magical distraction from reality. We do that in children's books. We do it in comics. We do it in motion pictures, feature films. It's all basically the same thing. Designing great characters. So
yeah, it's all about manipulating the audience to believe that it's real.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, cool. Thank you, Shane.
Yes. Thank you guys for having me.
Yeah.
Please don't kill Beauregard.
Oh, he's going down. It's going to be a few years.
I'm already like not wanting it to happen.
I want to see. Yeah. I can't wait for you to be finished with it and to put it out there. I think it's really a unique idea. I wish I had thought of it.
Here's what I think you should do. Instead of the bear rug, have just like a framed picture of him. And
or
you know, like he's been buried.
I thought he was going to say
by a casket.
I thought you were going to get your picture taken next to the gravestone.
The gravestone. That'd be funny. You go to a graveyard, get your photo taken, Photoshop
Beauregard
his letters into the you know, this big gravestone.
The bear rug's pretty cool too.
Yeah, I mean it's your thing, but I'm definitely gonna try something like that. That's awesome.
That's a good idea.
I take no ownership of that. I came up with it because I thought it was funny, but I wish everyone would do it because I want to see everyone's Christmas cards. Because to me, it's like it's this added element of I just want to see how you can manipulate me into caring about this thing. So
Right.
do it, and I want to see your Christmas cards. Bring yourselves adopt a new pet this Christmas.
Right.
And give yourself a little new animal that you can watch grow with your kids.
That's awesome.
Well, great, guys. Hey, thanks a lot, Shane. We learned a lot from that, and I think that everybody will appreciate it. So,
thank you so much. Thanks, Jake. Thanks, Will. You guys are great.
All right. Take care,
Bye.
guys, and talk to you later.